Welcome back to my channel. I'm Kelly Michelle, your fitness and nutrition coach. Today we're going to be talking about why it's important not to cut carbs and fat too low in a dieting phase, especially during the holidays. So when people actually sign up for our program, what we typically see is that they're eating lower protein, higher fats, and higher carbs. Most of the time they're not in a calorie surplus, but they just are not getting the same amount of fats, carbs, and protein each day. So they're not at calorie balance, which is really important. You want to know where those calories are actually coming from. And when you take carbs and fat down too low, you can really start to negotiate with your energy levels, sex drive, brain cognition, GI function, and all of the things that happen with metabolic adaptation. And even though those adaptations sometimes take longer in certain people, they are a cocktail for disaster, especially in the beginning of a diet. Where as you keep going with your diet, you may notice that at the end of the diet, you start to experience some of these energy issues. And sometimes these energy issues are a simple fix. You do a refeed or you do a small diet break for a week and you jump back into the dieting plan again. So the most important part of figuring out where you should start is where you are now. Where are your calories now is all interdependent on tracking. So you've got to track your macros or your food for about a week to figure out what your average calorie intake is and where your calories are coming from, whether it's fats, carbs, and proteins. Because again, protein is 4 calories per gram, carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram, and your fat is 9 calories per gram. The sum of those three are going to be your calories for the day. So if one day your protein's at 80 grams and the next day it's at 120, that's going to be a pretty big indicating factor of failure in a diet. We would want to make sure that you're sitting really close to 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight the whole entire time you're dieting, if not more, especially if you're an active individual who is looking to actually retain maximum lean mass while you're dieting. So one of the things that can be a major derailment can be too few energy sources from carbs and fat and just having absolutely no game plan for satiation. You need to be having protein, fat, and fiber, which means fiber comes from carbs. You need to have enough carbs also in your diet to get that fiber in. If you're shooting for 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 grams of fiber at all of your primary meals, or maybe 5 or 6 grams if you like to eat a little bit more fiber or be on the higher end for fiber, especially for satiation during a dieting phase, all of that would be interdependent on how you have your calories structured from protein, carbs, and fats. So when we go into deficits, a lot of times we'll see people go way too low in fat and they are just becoming a sugar burner, if you will, because their body is operating primarily off of carbs for fuel. And when those carbs get low, we know what happens. You can actually be pulling from protein as an energy source, which we do not want. So it's important to start with the appropriate percentages and then go based off of the client's feedback and their biofeedback each week. How are they feeling? Are they sleeping well? How's their digestion? How's their energy level throughout the day? How is their stress level, which is a very important factor while dieting, because the more stress we take on, coupled with the stress of dieting, the bigger problem that can cause with, satiation, wild cravings, and things like that. So we have to try to keep the craving bug at bay, and it's important to prioritize protein first when we're doing that. I always tell my clients protein first at every meal, especially when you're dieting. And if you want to have treats, always have that protein first. And then, give yourself 15 to 20 minutes, maybe even go for a walk. And if you have something like a piece of chocolate or 2 pieces of chocolate or a fudge sickle or something budgeted in your MyFitnessPal or your Macros First tracker, it is great to go and have a little walk and then come back. And it's not a reward. It just allows your body the chance to process that protein and signal satiation before you have something highly palatable like a treat. And that is really important for diet success, because if you go the entire week eating clean, there's a high likelihood that after 5 to 7 days of that, you're going to slip into weekend warrior mode, which means you'll blow it out once on the weekend. You'll feel bad about it. You'll start again on Monday. And again, that's kind of a cocktail for disaster, if you will, again. If we want to be successful in dieting, we want to have variety throughout the week. And if every day or two, you need to have 1 or 2 things in your budget, like a fudgesicle or like, a piece of toast with peanut butter and jam, something that you really look forward to each day, that is actually going to keep you on your plan longer and probably move you towards successful sustainability once you get there. So, sustainability is the most important part of dieting. If we get to a certain point and we do not start adding calories and moving us out of that deficit and closer to maintenance while maintaining those lean gains, because again, if you're in a 300 calorie deficit and you add 100 calories, you are now in a 200 calorie deficit, meaning if you do hit your macros, you should be staying lean the whole time you're adding calories. However, where things get very messy is when people go, oh, I have an extra 100 calories. I'm just going to stop tracking tightly. I would actually track fairly tightly up until you get to your maintenance. And then you can start to see whether or not you can eyeball things, not putting them on the food scale, because initially we want to get very, very good at looking at what the value of is of every food, so that when we get to maintenance, we no longer have to be 100% reliant on that food scale, especially when we go out to eat. That's kind of the practice run for getting to maintenance and then not having to put everything on the food scale the rest of our life. Some of you are on or off the program and have a very hard time living life in the gray area. And if you're one of those people, that is what I was, and that is why I found macro tracking to be so successful for me. It was a method that allowed me to have flexibility, especially on my weekends when I want to be more social. It allowed me to have a little bit more carbs on my training days. It allowed me to look at what my actual resting metabolic rate was and adjust for those days based off of my activity level and, of course, my social structure. So for me, it was a good fit because I can live life in the gray area now where I couldn't before, because again, I still had some of that bad programming and the old mindset in my brain about my past yo-yo dieting history. A lot of us struggle with that. A lot of us still think that we have to pull carbs and fat down really low to see success. But that is just honestly setting yourself up for failure. You bring those carbs and fats down too low, they do a variety of things, functions physiologically, and that's when we can start having issues with digestion. We can start having those sluggish days where you just can't recall. And depending on how extreme the calorie deficit is, that is when that adaptation starts to happen. It's also length and duration of that diet. So you want to make sure that you set yourself up for success by doing phases of dieting that might be 300 to 400 calorie deficit for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, or 3 to 4 weeks, and for some people 4 to 6 weeks. And then you have an upcoming carrot dangled out in front of you, which is your diet break or which is your incremental refeed. All of these things are different strategies that work well for different people. Some people cannot do a successful diet break because it's just too much for them and they feel like they are actually regressing, where this should teach you that that's actually not the case. You can go into a maintenance phase where you maintain your weight eating at maintenance, but you have to do it once successfully to see that that is the case. So where you were in a 300 or 400 calorie deficit, you may have to practice a couple different time frames of a few weeks here or there interjected into your dieting phases, where you actually practice hitting your macros at maintenance calories, having more carbs and fats during that time frame, maybe even a little bit lower protein, depending on how active you're going to be, and then watching to see that you actually settle in after 2 or 3 weeks at exactly the same weight. If the coach knows what they're doing with those maintenance phases, they will have you pegged probably just a little bit lower than maintenance to be conservative that first time. And then they may try to increase your calories a little bit more in the second diet break. Now, refeeds can be done various different ways. The way that I like to do refeeds with my clients is having extra carbs for like 2 or 3 days, maybe even 4 days in a row, where they actually get to eat more carbohydrates, which works really well around the holiday time, especially if they want to stay in a deficit, but they have 2 or 3 days coming up where they've got family in town or functions and they're subsequent. They might even actually do a higher day, a lower day, and 2 higher days to have those 3 refeed days somewhere in that 4 or 5 day time frame. And that works very, very well for people who actually shift gears nicely back into those transitional fat loss phases and into maintenance. For most people, that works very well. For some people, it is not enough time or not enough of a break, and a diet break is going to be much better. So the most prevalent reason that I think people actually gain the weight back is they start to go into this relaxed mindset in maintenance and they stop tracking their food for a couple days. And one day leads to two, and two to three, and three to four. And before they know it, they have gotten completely off track and they absolutely cannot get back into it. So I highly recommend that if you get to maintenance, that you still track your food. I've been tracking my food for over 10 years. I track it every day because I know that I'm just human like everyone else. And if I didn't track it just like my budget, I might actually go over budget or under budget several days. And then those days would turn into months. And finally, I would see my composition start to change drastically, especially in the midsection, which is such a consistency area for those of us up over the age of 40. Thanks for joining us today, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful, safe, and happy holiday season from KMF, and we'll see you back next time.